Ik denk dat je niet zo vreselijk veel macht hebt om dingen anders te laten gaan. Het gebeurt gewoon.
Maar ja, ik ben wel blij dat ik gewoon nog leef natuurlijk.
On voit l'être aimé complètement distordu et il est là, il est plus là, mais en même temps il est là.
Quando hai alle spalle un dolore, una sofferenza del genere, apprezzi anche le piccole cose. Non è scontato niente, non è scontato che respiri, non è scontato che stai in piedi e cammini, puoi correre, non è scontato vedere il sole, non è scontato niente.
Bijna verdwaasd rond, in een trance rond. Maar ik moet zeggen, de zorg eromheen is wel heel erg goed. En ja, het was een heftige tijd, maar wel een mooie tijd.
Welke gevoelens ik heb ervaren. En je bent ontzettend nauw betrokken bij mijn vrouw, wat die meemaakt. En je kunt daar niks mee, maar je moet er zelf mee uit de voeten. En je hebt wel het volle vertrouwen, dat had ik wel steeds.
Io sono un medico di terapia intensiva, non un rianimatore, nel senso che lavoro con i neonati, quindi mi occupo di tutt'altra di bambini molto molto piccoli, non faccio il loro stesso lavoro, però chiaramente il rapporto con i medici è stato condizionato anche dalla mia posizione. Tra l'altro sono dei colleghi perché sono nel mio stesso, quindi da una parte ero sicuramente facilitata nel comprendere razionalmente quello che stava succedendo, cioè non avevo bisogno dei lunghissimi colloqui perché mi spiegassero per avere notizie cliniche, perché era più semplice riassumermi le cose. D'altra parte, dal punto di vista umano, dal punto di vista emotivo, questo non è servito a niente, anzi forse ha peggiorato le cose, perché sapevo cosa poteva succedere e non volevo accettarlo.
Ahora lo que me motiva es mejorar la vida de la gente. Ya no es tanto la técnica, ¿no?, como cuando eres joven, porque llega un punto que la técnica es técnica y no tiene ningún secreto, sino las pequeñas cosas que pueden hacer que marcan la diferencia. El hablar con el paciente, con la familia, el hacer una educación sanitaria que nadie ha hecho hasta ese punto y tú no lo sabías porque dabas por hecho que lo habían hecho. Esas cosas son las que te motivan, el mejorar el cuidado del paciente.
Il faut faire du cas par cas, en fait. C'est primordial, parce que chaque histoire est différente. Et quand vous vous trouvez en tant que patient, en tant que famille de patients, dans cette situation, dans un univers où vous ne parlez pas cette langue-là, cette langue faite d'acronymes et de termes techniques que vous ne connaissez pas, quand vous vous retrouvez face au savoir et que du coup vous vous retrouvez impuissant, que vous vous retrouvez stupide, que vous vous retrouvez humilié, que vous vous retrouvez démuni, comment faire?
Jokainen lääkäri varmaan pelkää komplikaatiota tai jotakin, että mitään ei hiffaa jotain juttua, mitä olisi pitänyt hiffata, joskin siinäkin auttaa se, että harvoin tekee yksin koko päivää töitä. Nämä tuli nyt äkkiseltään mulle mieleen.
And what scares me is that making those decisions and making those wrong decisions and the realization that that decision in 3-4 weeks' time, where you end up having a patient who, in effect, can be crippled by life-sustaining therapy, which may not have been in their best interests or the family's best interests. And that still scares me. And I think it scares a lot of colleagues, but intensive care is much more multidisciplinary now, and I think that has helped our decision-making and has reduced that fear factor.
Honesty and humility go a long way. And most patients and relatives understand that we're also human and mistakes can happen and should be openly discussed.
Οι ασθενείς όμως έρχονται σε επαφή με εμάς, ιδιαίτερα αυτοί που βγαίνουν από το νοσοκομείο, πηγαίνουν σε κέντρα αποκατάστασης και ύστερα από πάρα πολύ καιρό έρχονται να μας συναντήσουν, γιατί ξέρουν τα πρόσωπά μας, τις φωνές μας, τον αγώνα που δίνουμε μέσα στο χώρο για να καταφέρουμε να τους σώσουμε, να επιβιώσουν και έρχονται να μας δουν, να μας γνωρίσουν από κοντά, να τους δούμε κι εμείς.
Together with my colleagues, in particular the nursing colleagues, we arranged a wedding for a patient who was at the end of his life and had decided to marry his long-term partner before he later died. And it was very moving to be part of this very special event in the intensive care unit.
It's a real privilege to be able to support a patient and their family through that, what I hope is the worst thing that ever happens to them in their lives, to be able to support them through that, hopefully to recovery, or to support them through managing a dignified death.
Il faut ramener la vie. Pourquoi est-ce que tout est si blanc et voire gris? Pourquoi est-ce que ce lino couine autant sous les crocs des médecins? C'est insoutenable. Pourquoi est-ce que tout est autant aseptisé? C'est pas 3 photos qui vont empêcher les gens de travailler. Moi, je pense que c'est important de ramener de la vie à cet endroit où on se trouve à la frontière d'eux, au bord d'eux. On se trouve dans une espèce de no man's land où on sait pas sur quoi ça va déboucher, quoi.
La mia opinione della terapia intensiva è fantastica perché mi hanno salvato la vita e dopo 3 anni sono qui. Anche a un altro ospedale che mi hanno dato per morto, per fortuna sono arrivato in questa terapia intensiva e mi hanno salvato veramente la vita.
Solo belle cose possono uscire dalla mia bocca, ovviamente, perché senza di loro non sarei qui, ripeto, non sarei qui oggi.
Intensive care medicine allows me to learn something new every day. So every day I meet colleagues and I hear of their new technologies, new advances, and progress in their particular specialty. But most importantly, every day is a different day with new challenges, and I enjoy the interaction with my colleagues and most importantly with patients and their relatives. So provides a great variety, it's different every day, and it's a specialty where progress is made on a regular basis.
Grazie perché mi hanno ricordato anche come si lavora. Cioè, io faccio questo mestiere, lo faccio da tanti anni, ci sono dei momenti in cui sei stanco, in cui hai le tue cose, nel senso che hai la tua vita, hai delle preoccupazioni, però io ero serena quando andavo via, non perché sapevo che non sarebbe morto, poteva morire, poteva star male, ma era nelle mani migliori, sapevo che era nelle migliori mani e questo mi dava quel minimo di tranquillità che potevo cercare. È giusto che i bambini che mi vengono affidati e i genitori quando vanno a casa possono pensare la stessa cosa. Siamo nelle migliori mani, quindi dobbiamo sempre fare il meglio. Grazie a loro per esserlo il meglio.
I'm an anesthesiologist and I'm proud to be an intensivist. We, intensivists, are working together to fight COVID-19. Together, we are intensive care medicine.
Hi, I'm proud of being an intensivist. We are fighting COVID-19. Together, we are intensive care medicine.
I am an anaesthetist and I'm proud to be an intensivist. We are working together to fight COVID-19. Together, we are intensive care medicine.
I am an intensivist. I'm proud of it. Intensivists with various specialty backgrounds work together as a multidisciplinary team to prevent and treat temporary risk of death due to COVID-19.
My name is Jan de Waale and I'm proud to be a surgery-trained intensivist and work in intensive care. We work together to beat COVID-19. Together, we are intensive care medicine.
Hello everyone, my name is Yenane Nguyen. I work at Cochin Academic Hospital, University of Paris, and it's with great pleasure that I will share this webinar on patient safety. First, I would like to thank the ESICM President, Dr. Cicconi, and the Chair of the POIC section, Dr. Feldeiser, for giving me the opportunity to organize this webinar. I also would like to thank our three speakers, Professor Flynn, Captain Bromley, and Professor Jolin for accepting our invitations. If you have any questions to our speakers, do not hesitate to post them on the chat or on social networks. We will answer to your questions at the end of the presentation. Before giving the floor to our speaker, I will start with a short introduction on patient safety and critical care. 80% of adverse healthcare events are not due to a knowledge deficit or equipment failure, but they are the results of human factors breakdowns, such as cognitive bias, poor communication, failure to cross-check, or events occurring in our ICUs are not leading to immediate death, but they still produce substantial morbidity with an impact on patient quality of life, with an impact on quality of life at work for healthcare workers, with an impact on costs. Cost failures represent around 15% of hospital expenditure and include also the growing mistrust of the population towards the medical community and healthcare institutions. The latest OECD report states that patient harm is the 14th leading cause of the global disease burden. So what is next? Arguing that mistakes happen or to err is human is just not enough. Human errors cannot be eliminated. But let's act together to develop smart solutions to lower risk, reduce the occurrence of avoidable harm to an acceptable minimum, make error less likely, and reduce its impact when it does occur. Everybody is concerned by patient safety: healthcare providers, patients, families, civil society organizations, educational and research institutions, health professional societies, regulatory authorities, pharmaceutical industries, and governments. So what to do in practice? Our first challenge is to measure our critical care safety culture and patient harm. There are different tools to assess safety culture, such as the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality Survey. Epidemiological data on patient harm is lacking because reporting omissions or adverse events are not routine processes for many of us. Why? Notably due to the lack of awareness on patient safety, the lack of smart incident reporting systems, the loss of confidence in the institution, or the fear of potential medical legal consequences. Collecting this data is essential to provide a clear picture of the problem. Our second challenge is to analyze patient harm through human factors sciences. A better understanding of our errors, our diagnostic reasoning, will help us to be early adopters of preventive strategies. More research data on human factors in critical care is needed. Last but not least, our third challenge is to invest in human factors team training. Training ICU teams in human factors is essential, as well as engaging ICU leaders in a positive safety culture, including patients, families, and civil society organizations. What could be better than to invest in prevention costs rather than in failure costs? In short, you will understand my take-home message could be as brief as measure, analyze, and train, measure your safety culture, analyze patient harm, and train your teams with human factor sciences. Let's now introduce our first speaker. Patient safety has lagged behind high-risk industries such as aviation. So who better than an airline pilot, who is also the founder of the Clinical Human Factors Group in the United Kingdom, to present to us the patient safety movement. The video of Mr. Brumley, just a routine operation on YouTube, has gathered more than 500,000 views, and I strongly recommend it to you. Thank you very much, Mr. Brumley, for your participation.
Thank you very much, Yen Lang, and thank you very much, everybody, for the chance to talk to you this afternoon. So, yes, I'll talk a little bit about my background. The majority of you will be familiar with it. I'm not really an expert. I'm just someone who has a day-to-day use of the science of human factors. But also, I suppose, if I do have an expertise, it's in the life, the evolution of patient safety. And the topic that I was asked to talk about was, how do we achieve zero preventable deaths? Can we achieve zero preventable deaths? The scientists will tell you that is not possible. My observation of safety critical industries is that is highly unlikely that we'll get to zero. But obviously, as individuals, we want to achieve zero in our professions. But at the same time, we have to remain humble, and we have to recognize that we will make mistakes. And really, that's, I suppose, the starting point for the short time I have with you, is to say, if we know that we make mistakes, and we all make mistakes, what can we do to reduce the probability of a major disaster happening to us and to those around us? As Yen Lan's already mentioned, my background is as an airline pilot. This is a very old picture of me learning to fly an Airbus A330 about 20 years ago. You can tell it's old because I still have hair. And on the right-hand side, there's me flying some aerobatics, which I do in my spare time. I still fly. I'm now a training captain for a major UK airline, and that gives me a fantastic insight into people working under pressure, and it gives me a chance to observe people who I regard as highly skilled in their workplace. We've already mentioned just a routine operation, which I'm sure you're familiar with. This is Elaine with our two young children, Victoria and Adam. And yes, you know the story that Elaine goes into hospital back in 2005 for a procedure. Problems occur after she's anaesthetized. It becomes a can't intubate, can't ventilate. The emergency, which has slowly occurred to the team over the course of 10 minutes, is then mishandled, we can say. And when I say the word mishandled, it implies that the clinicians were wrong, that they were bad people. They weren't. They were good people who found themselves in a situation for which they weren't prepared. And we've already heard in the last few minutes about simulation and the role of that, and how it can get you ready for what you might face. But we know that the science of human factors offers us many thoughts and ideas. Today is going to be talking a lot about the non-technical skills, the behaviors that you and I can adopt to stay safe. But what I want to do is just remind us very quickly, though, that the science of human factors offers us a great deal more than that. In aviation, the science really goes back to the 1940s, and it was particularly relevant to mention the aeroplane in the top picture. Atul Gawande, in his book about the Checklist Manifesto and his other works, talks about the development of this aircraft, the American B-17 Flying Fortress, a technical marvel. And Atul Gawande talks about how this aircraft, because it was far too complex for one person to operate, they had to start using checklists. But I would argue the bigger contribution to our understanding of safety was what happened after that. This aircraft had moving gear and moving flaps, so the wheels could be moved up and down, the flaps could be moved up and down to help the aircraft land at a slower speed. But they had a lot of accidents where pilots were moving the flaps when they should have moved the wheels, and they were moving the wheels when they should have moved the flaps, and this didn't make sense. So a very bright young engineer was asked to come and look at the problem. And what he did was he went and looked at a similar type of aeroplane, the aircraft in the bottom pitch, the DC-3. And that aircraft, although very different in its role, still had moving flaps and moving wheels. And so he looked at the accident rate on that aircraft, and he found that it was very different. The DC-3 hardly had any accidents of that sort, but the B-17 Flying Fortress was having lots of accidents. Were the B-17 pilots stupid? Were they poorly trained? And the answer was no. They came through the same training process. But what he noticed was that on the B-17, the lever that moved the wheels up and down and the lever that moved the flaps up and down were very similar, and they were next to each other in the cockpit. On the DC-3, those levers were different and they were in different places on the cockpit. And so even today, and it doesn't matter whether you're flying on a Boeing or an Airbus or any other type of modern aeroplane, this is the center console of the aeroplane I fly, the Airbus, and you'll see that if I want to move the gear, the wheels, I have to lean forward. There is a lever shaped like a wheel, it's painted black like a tyre, it feels like a tyre, and indeed on some aircraft it actually is made of rubber. And if I want to move the flaps, I have to reach behind me, and I have to move a lever that is smooth and shaped like a flap or like a wing. On this particular aircraft, virtually every switch and button and lever you see are electric, and it would be cheaper just to design them like electric switches. But they're deliberately designed this way to make it hard to get it wrong and easy to get it right. And I just want to embed that lesson again, and I appreciate many of you will be familiar with the two characters in this photograph. If you're not, on the left is the great racing driver in Formula One, Ayrton Senna. On the right is Professor Sid Watkins, who at the time was the chief medical officer of Formula One. A number of years ago, before Sid passed away, I was lucky to spend an evening with him, and he shared with me the story of Ayrton's death and the impact it had on him. In the 25 years prior to Senna's death, there had been about one racing driver a year killed in a Formula One racing accident. In the 25 years since Senna's death, only one racing driver, I believe, has died in Formula One as a direct result of a racing accident. That's a remarkable improvement in safety. What Sid didn't do is he didn't try and change the driver's behaviours. He didn't say to the drivers, hey, everybody, slow down, take it easy, don't take risks. He knew that was unworkable. But what he did do is he campaigned for subtle changes to the design of the Formula One tracks. He campaigned for subtle changes to the rules from the governing body. He campaigned for the manufacturers to make subtle changes to the designs of the cars. And he worked to standardise medical facilities across the Formula One racetracks. So that remarkable improvement in safety came about not as a result of changing behaviours, but of changing systems. And that's a lesson in human factors brought to you not by a pilot, but by a doctor. And today in healthcare, we see the same issues. This is an anaesthetic machine that many of you will be familiar with. Some of you may indeed operate this very machine. And you'll notice the red arrow points to a switch, which is kind of out of view. And in one position, it sends all those vital things to the patient, the air, the oxygen. In the other position, it vents it to the atmosphere. To me, as a pilot, I'm horrified when I see that switch. It has no guard on it. It has no warning alarm or light or anything like that that tells you that it's not in the correct position. When this machine was introduced in one NHS hospital near me about 10 years ago, in the first month, 3 patients almost died as a result of that switch being in the wrong position. It has taken 2 deaths in the last 10 years before the medical regulator of devices in the UK has finally started to question whether the design criteria is correct. And I don't know what you call it if you use this machine elsewhere, but in the UK, anaesthetists refer to this switch as the death switch, by the way. And healthcare presents you with many of these system problems to deal with and expect you to get on with it and expect you to be the final line of defence. We haven't even talked about the design of processes, of other equipment, of IT, indeed of drugs packaging. And this supposedly is taken from a helicopter emergency medicine site. What could possibly go wrong? Before my colleague Rona Flynn starts to talk, and then Francois Julien, about the non-technical skills side, I just want to give a brief introduction about how we now look at the training that we do, because although systems are critical, you are still the final line of defence, and getting that teamwork and those behaviours right is critical. And in international aviation now, we've moved into the world of what we call evidence-based training. But what evidence do we mean? The evidence is the things that kills us and harms us. What are the things that cause the most accidents? What are the things that cause the most incidents? The things that cause the near misses that we pick up on our reporting systems? What's the regulator's view on what's happening elsewhere in the world? And indeed, on the top right is one of our simulators, very high fidelity. What is it that when we train pilots, they find easy to do and hard to do? And together, that builds into an evidence base of what can go wrong and what behaviours are present when things go wrong. But likewise, in successful flights, what behaviours are present that seem to contribute to success. So if you behave in a particular way, it doesn't guarantee failure, it doesn't guarantee success. But we know from an evidence base that certain behaviours are more likely to contribute to success. And the world of non-technical skills thinking is moving on in aviation now, and we have this competency framework. Again, this is an international document. It will be very familiar to airlines across Europe. That there are broadly 9 areas of our competence. So you'll see that the light grey are the technical things, very specific to me. Can I hand fly the plane? Can I manipulate the automatics? Do I have the knowledge that I need around my profession? But over 50% of these are what we would traditionally call the non-technical skills: the situational awareness, the leadership, the teamwork, the communication, the decision-making. Funnily enough, the same things that I talk about when I talk about my late wife's case. These are so important to safety. They are over 50% of this framework. And under each of these headings, you will find 8, 9, 10 descriptions of behaviour that we look for. That's what we're really interested in, is what's the behaviour that we observe our colleagues using when we train them, when we examine them, when we check them, which is done every 6 months? How much are they using those behaviours, and how much do we want them to use those behaviours? And that's really where safety comes from. And for me, it's all about looking around you and helping people develop those behaviours. I'm going to hand over to Professor Rona Flynn in a moment. She really is an expert, unlike me, who's just an armchair enthusiast. As you know, I helped found the Clinical Human Factors Group many years ago. We continue to promote an understanding of human factors in healthcare. In the last year, one of the things we did at the very early stages of the pandemic is we listened to Italian doctors and we also listened to the British doctors who were working with COVID patients, and we listened to experts like Rona, and we looked at what other industries did to help manage complexity and novel situations. And we developed a set of guidelines, which I know Rona's going to talk about later. But I just want to say thank you very much for listening to me. Thank you very much to Yen Lang for the opportunity. Thank you to Francois Julien for his work in spreading the word elsewhere. And thank you to Rona, who has been a tremendous support for what we do. But most of all, thank you to you for what you are doing at the moment for all of us in society. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martin. So now let's introduce our second speaker. Rona Flynn is Professor of Industrial Psychology at the Aberdeen Business School at Robert Gordon University in Scotland. She conducts psychological research on safety in a wide range of areas, including on patient safety in healthcare. She has published many papers in the field of anesthesiology and critical care medicine. 15 years ago, she worked with anesthetists to create a behavioral taxonomy for anesthetists' non-technical skills called ANTS. She has further extended this concept to surgeons and nurses. Her current research on mindfulness and safety. Thank you very much, Rona, for your participation.
Hi, I just fixed my screen here. Okay, is that okay? Can you see my presentation now? Okay, can you see it now? Okay. Can you see the PowerPoint now? Is that okay? Can you see the slides? Okay. So thank you for the invitation to speak in this important webinar. I'm a psychologist, not a clinician, so I'm just going to say a little bit about maybe some of the psychology that is relevant to performing under pressure with reference to patient safety. We know there have been a whole set of significant work demands and pressures during the COVID situation, and you would be much more aware of these than I am. But these are things like time pressure, workload, fatigue, wearing extra PPE, increased risks for you, increased risks for patients. And as Martin mentioned, all these things are contributing to the pressure and the need, I guess, for the very good non-technical skills. Where COVID comes in on top of your normal work demands, this makes things even more difficult. So Martin mentioned that there are some resources on the Clinical Human Factors Group website. These are some podcasts that were made with people working on the front line, and these are available on the website for you to watch and listen to. And this is the document. I know you probably won't be able to see the detail of this, but this is available. You can download this. This is what we collated from a mixture of the psychologists, the human factors experts, and the clinicians to give some advice of key human factors messages when working online. And these include things to do with the team and also things to do about maybe taking a little bit of extra time, if possible, before making decisions, which is a point I will come back to. So the non-technical skills are going to be talked about by Francois, and I think, as I say, these are very important in this situation, but particularly the cognitive skills of decision-making and situation awareness, and these are the ones I will just briefly mention here. To take decision-making, first of all, I have done some work on decision-making by incident commanders, police, firefighters, the kind of people who make decisions in high-pressure situations. And I was looking for some condensed version of material on this, and I came across this very nice document that had been prepared on decision-making under pressure. This is some guidance, some ideas that have come from research by British psychologists who are working with police or military, those kinds of people who often have to make life and death decisions in high-risk situations. And this is where the guidance, this is the key facts from that guidance. They say you have to learn to be accepting the emotional responses in these situations. So it is normal for decision makers in these high pressure situations to be feeling overwhelmed, not knowing where to start. The second point is realizing you may have more time than you think. And in this case, to be able, where there is sufficient time, to take a step back and think before making a decision. The work of Alison with police commanders has shown some very interesting recent findings about what he calls decision inertia. This is commanders asking for more and more information to avoid making a difficult decision. I think the message here is people having to learn that it may be necessary to take the least worst option, and that is true of intensivists who have to learn how to do this when all the decisions are difficult. When you are feeling anxious as the decision maker, you need to act, you need to role model how a non-anxious person would feel. And if you are the leader in a crisis situation, the team pay even more attention to the leader, and anxiety is very infectious. So this is a skill that needs to be practiced. A leader should ask when told to be told by their team when they are wrong, and then messages about communications being very short and sharp and focusing on the goal rather than the decision. You know, where are you aiming for in this situation rather than necessarily the precise decision of the moment. So if we look at COVID safety guidelines, and these are ones I've looked at coming from industry as well as healthcare, and I'm sure you're familiar with these in your own situations. I'm just going to pick up the first of these, which is to do with hesitating before acting. Some of you may have seen this particular image. It was designed by Markus Röhl, a German anaesthetist working in the simulator. And Marcus pointed out how many times he had seen teams take poor decisions because they did not devote even 10 seconds to considering if they were doing the right thing. And he devised this 10 seconds for 10 minutes principle that I think is a very useful, simple message, just to pause and collect a little more information or check with the team members before a decision, an action, particularly an irreversible action like administering a drug, is taken. Marcus argues 10 seconds may save you 10 minutes and it may actually save a life. And I think this is maybe a useful image to have on the wall somewhere, just to remind people 10 seconds can be very well spent. The clues for slowing down, this has been taken from firefighters and pilots. When do you need to hesitate? When do you need to slow down the decision making? This is all about when things are not going completely as expected. Maybe there's an unexpected element, the plan is not working as you thought it would, there's a sense the team is confused, for some reason the task is more difficult than expected, something is not quite right with the equipment or the circumstances. These are all being taught in other sectors as clues to when it's good to hesitate, it's good to slow down the task. I'm going to finish by talking about some new work that we are doing in industry, and it's focused not so much on decision making, but more on situation awareness, on attention, on vigilance, to be alert and have a good understanding of what is happening around you. And we're looking at this in our project in relation to the topic of mindfulness. Mindfulness has become very popular. There's a lot of mindfulness training around. You can download some training, listen to an app. But we are looking at this in relation to safety, which has been done less frequently. And I did notice that there is this book, I haven't read it, I've just come across it, on patient safety ethics that is linking vigilance and mindfulness to improve patient safety. So other people are interested in this same idea. This is our project. So this is a project I'm involved in with psychologists at the University of Houston and a couple of large companies who operate in the Gulf of Mexico. And we have funding from the National Academy of Sciences to look at the relationship between mindfulness training and safety outcomes. We have published so far one white paper, which you can obtain on the University of Houston website for the project, and the references there. And this is a report of a literature review that we did looking at the relationship between mindfulness training and safety outcomes, some of which are related to patient safety, most of which are related to worker or process safety. And we have been looking at the link between situation awareness, because this is what we're interested in. Situation awareness is very important in high-risk environments, knowing where you are, anticipating what might happen next. And components of mindfulness to do with attention to the present moment and acting with awareness are very like situation awareness. They're conceptually very similar. So mindfulness training may be possible to adapt, particularly for this attentional component that is so relevant for safety. We've looked in the meta-analysis, this literature review, we've looked at the findings of studies from different sectors. We are particularly interested in the energy industry, but we've also picked up some papers from healthcare. And the finding of this meta-analysis, which is currently under review, the scientific paper is under review, does show a positive relationship reported in these studies between mindfulness training delivered usually at the work site and safety outcomes. For our work, we are working on offshore ships, oil rigs, platforms. So we have to design training that is very simple and very suitable for use at the work site. And listed here, and they are described in this white paper, are commonly used mindfulness techniques such as the ones that we are using, and these take only a few minutes to use, and we are training the workforce to apply these maybe 2 times a day, particularly before they begin safety critical tasks. And our project is looking whether applying these techniques can have any benefit for safety. This may operate through 2 different routes. Mindfulness training may improve attention and situation awareness, or it may operate through the well-being pathway, that it makes people feel better, and that may then have a knock-on effect, a positive effect on safety behaviours and thus on safety outcomes. So we are in the middle of this project. We are currently gathering data and we're testing this relationship. And why is this relevant to intensive care and working under pressure? Well, in the longer term, if we get positive results, the very simple, short, attentional focused exercises may be applicable in other worlds. So they're very tailored to the work environment. We're trying to measure both effects on well-being and on situation awareness, as well as then measuring these safety outcomes. So my final point is maybe this kind of exercise, and you can see these in the white paper that's currently available, may be applicable to improving performance in intensive care and patient safety, and maybe also helping to keep staff feeling a little better, improving their well-being where they're working in these high performance conditions. And that's my email if you would like to make contact. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, François. So we have a couple of questions. We have a few minutes. So I will give you some questions. So the first one is, how has the legal climate influenced the safety culture? Clinicians doing more for fear of missing something and patients expecting more? Another question is, if most errors are systems issues, who bears the responsibilities? The organization that does nothing when concerns are raised? Another one, how do you avoid turning incident safety reporting into a punitive exercise? So who wants to answer? François, maybe the last one?
Can we have a checklist with the questions? I'm sorry, because
So, the last one, how do you avoid turning incident safety reporting into a punitive exercise?
Okay. So I think if I have to say very quickly, to answer very quickly to this, I think promoting a just culture is maybe the main answer I would give. I mean, the main goal. So just culture is a very broad concept. I think Martin or Rona could explain in a better words, but it's to say that you have to focus on what's working and what is making your safety barrier stronger, instead of focusing on what's not working and human error and what's not, and failures and etc. So the goal is really to focus on what works. And as Martin and Rona says, very in a very nice way, it's making easy the right thing to do and difficult the wrong things to do. So I think this could apply also to this.
I think to answer the point about how when something happens, how do we deal with it from a system point of view or from a individual point of view? What I noticed after my late wife died was that the system in healthcare is not very good at investigating. And getting really good quality investigation is critical. So that is why now in the United Kingdom, in just England at the moment, we now have the Healthcare Safety Investigation Branch, which is modelled on our air accident investigation branch. And with legislation going through our Parliament, it should be a completely independent body where evidence given to it remains protected. And the purpose of that is that already this organisation, although it's not fully set up, has brought a big overview to incident investigation. By being independent, it's able to work out where the system problems are that led to the human error. Human error is never a cause. Human error is a symptom of a problem. And I think having good quality investigation is really important if we are to improve safety, because then we can fix the system.
I think the other thing that I would add to that, I think all these good comments relate also to looking upwards in the organisation. This presentation has been focused very much on those who are at the sharp end, at the operational end, who are delivering the care and the treatment. But as Francois says, this is also to do with the culture in the organisation. And the more senior people in the organisation, the managers, the board, however your management system is, I think you also have to look at the safety commitment and the safety behaviours of the people who are very senior in the organisation, because they are creating the climate in which everybody else is working. They are the ones who liaise with government. And so we need to not just look at the intensive care unit, but we need to look at the bigger aspect of the system, particularly the managers of the hospital in which the intensive care unit is based.
So you're right, definitely. And there is another comment online saying that the analogy between the airline and public healthcare is simply not true or applicable. Just look at the difference in level of investment in training, staffing, and finances between the two. And I suppose that Martin, you will agree with that.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, I think, but let's be first of all, let's say that the context is very important. So you're right. In aviation, we have a very regulated environment. We have equipment that's been designed well, and we often don't have to deal with daily emergencies. So if you think about your world of intensive care, every day you're dealing with abnormal or emergency situations. And very, very rarely do you have a run-of-the-mill normal situation to deal with. In my world, it's the opposite. 99% of the time, everything is normal. But then maybe on one or two occasions, we have to deal with something that is abnormal or emergency. But my argument is that actually that requires more investment in training in healthcare, and especially simulation, because it is what your working day is so complex. You are having to create safety from so many suboptimal things that using simulation, that using the tools that we talked about today, developing those behaviors is absolutely critical, far more than it probably is in my industry.
Okay, so we have also a question for you, Francois, about simulation. At what frequency do you advise the ICU teams to perform simulation scenarios?
So this is a very interesting question. Actually, I don't have data to support any specific answer to that. But what is known is that if you do some in situ simulation or simulation with mannequin, it's very powerful. So you can learn and you can practice. You can do stress tests in your ICU or whatever your place you're working in, and the video simulation is here to just to to refresh, to retrain, but in a distant e-learning way. So basically, we are doing going to do some studies and to see, but I guess educational sciences and what is known already in the aeronautical industry there is some arguments for like every 3 to 6 months, depending on the topics. And when you look at airline pilot, I think that they train every 6 months on some procedures. And so basically I would answer that.
Thank you. Rona, I think you want to add something?
It was unrelated. I take the point about aviation is important to look at, because we can learn a lot from the way they have improved and continue to manage their safety. But I was just going to say we can look at other industries. So if we are in France, for example, we could look to the oil industry, to big companies like Total and Schlumberger, and there's a lot to learn from how other people in high-risk situations also manage their operations.
Yeah, I'd like to add a point to this. I hear a lot. There is a kind of fatigue among certain physicians about comparing airline industry and medical healthcare industry, and I can understand. But as Rona says, it's about human interactions, and there is a lot of concepts that can be transposed, and of course, also healthcare industry has a lot to share with other industry. We are facing with resilience, maybe much more than other industries. And the COVID outbreak is an example. I mean, we were facing something very new, and when we look at what we've created last year, it's pretty amazing. Yeah.
So thank you very much. So thank you for joining us today. I hope that you enjoyed this webinar. If you want to read more about this, we are going to put in the description the links of shared information. And so thank you to our three speakers again, Martin, Rona, and François. And good afternoon to everybody.
Thank you.
I hope the next time will be in real life.